Grandma got run over by a reindeer. Now, when it comes to below mediocre Christmas specials, this was the one that not a lot of people seem to care about. Yet, it's developed quite the bandwagon, with reviewers like the Cartoon Hero, Huey Toonmore, and the Nostalgia Critic giving their most honest opinions about this animated TV movie, and we all know how it all turned out to be. And I'm still very surprised that this thing managed to get quite the bandwagon, and well, even though people decide never to really say that this film ever existed, well, it still managed to gain quite the cult following, but pretty much for all the wrong reasons. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. If you haven't noticed, this is my review of Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer, which first aired on the WB on October 31, 2000. Why they decided to air it on Halloween instead of, let's say, Christmas, or like before Christmas, like somewhere between late November or early December, I'll never know, but I digress. This animated film was directed by Phil Roman. It was produced by Jim Fisher, Noel Quinn Roman, and Jim Stahl. It was based on the one-hit wonder song of the same name, sung by Elmo and Patsy. And it stars the voices of Elmo Shropshire, or Dr. Elmo, as the voice of the adult Jake, and the grandfather Spankenheimer, Alex Doduk, Maggie Blue O'Hara, Susan Blue, Michelle Lee, Jim Stahl, Venus Terzo, Cam Clark, Phil Hayes, Scott McNeil, Pauline Newstone, Kathleen Barr, and Christopher Gaze. Now, a little backstory of how I got introduced into this film. This was by chance, and when I saw the trailers on Cartoon Network, I was kind of curious about this film. I thought it had some promise back then. Heck, it came out somewhere in 2002 where I used to live, well, in the Philippines. I was 10 years old at the time, and when I heard this film came out on Cartoon Network, I was kind of curious. Safe to say, I used to like it ever since I was a kid. And then, when I grew up and even caught this during my Christmas vacation in California once again, I still kind of liked it, but my like for it ever since I was 10 was getting fewer and fewer. It was just diminishing as time went on. I didn't love it, I just tolerated it. And as time went further, I found out that this thing was unremarkable. Yeah, let's just say that Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer is pretty much in that category of media that I used to like ever since I was a kid, but as I grew up, I found out a lot of flaws, and there were just a lot of things that I didn't really care for, and I probably detested. So let's get on to what I thought about the story, the animation, music, characters, and the voice acting. Now, the story, well, when you have a one-hit wonder song and try to make it into a full story with a lot of plot and thought, you have to make sure you do it right. Apparently, this film just didn't. When it comes to its story, everything seems to fall flat on its face. There are a lot of moments where I kind of wonder just how stupid some of these characters can be, just how stupid some of the motivations can be, and just a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of things that just make me wonder, what the hell? There were just a lot of things that started to become very illogical, and I used to not notice it ever since I was 10, even though a part of me still noticed it. But as I grew, the flaws start to get a lot more present, and it's not a pretty sight to see. So basically, I'm unimpressed with the story. It has not held up, and I just found it very disappointing. It's god-awful at worst, and, well, mediocre at best, in terms of its execution. And then we get to the animation. Now, I will give it credit. The animation is at least colorful and nice to look at, but when you get to the inconsistencies, you kind of notice that there's definitely something up. Like, for example, in that cabin scene where Cousin Mel turns around to see if someone's outside, we see that the couch doesn't really look totally defined in perspective, but almost looks as though that it just came out of some drawing that an artist made, and that was just it. And at times when it came to the character movements, another part of the inconsistencies, sometimes the characters move normally, but at times you kind of notice that they move faster than they should, and then the animation for the movements of the characters tend to be rather a little bit more paused and a little bit more jobby would be the word. So yes, despite the colorful animation, despite the decent character designs, even though they don't stand out, the animation leaves a lot to be desired. I mean, it's still pretty good, but if you could take away all the inconsistencies and all of the flubs, it probably could have stood out stylistically. But as it is, let's just say I'm not really that impressed. Then we have the music. Now, for the most part, the music can be decent, like the titular song, but then you have other songs sung throughout the film, like Grandma's, fruitcake song, and that was totally unmemorable. It would feel like Christmas was decent, but it felt totally out of place. And Grandma's hanging out with the superstars, Grandma spending Christmas with the superstars was catchy, but kind of unmemorable. But the worst song in this freaking film definitely has to be the duet sung by Cousin Mel and I Am Slime. Oh yes, I'm sure you people noticed that. Grandma's gonna sue the pants off of Santa. I hated this song ever since I was a kid. I was annoyed by it. And this was coming from someone who used to kind of like this ever since he was a kid. So this was a song I hated even to this very day, mostly because it felt so out of place and it was just so annoying, and as a villain song for Cousin Mel and I Am Slime, it's totally lame. It's god-awful. It's shit. It's horrid. It's absolute crap. Why would this be the villain song for Cousin Mel and I Am Slime? It makes absolutely no sense. But yeah, thanks to this song in particular, let's just say that despite some decent numbers, let's just say that the music doesn't really stand out, despite a few decent numbers. But the down part was, there are times it just almost felt out of place. And then we get to the characters, and oh my goodness. I used to kind of care about them ever since I was a kid, but growing up, I just found them very bland. With the exception of Grandma and maybe Grandpa Spankenheimer, and to some extent Quincy the Elf and Santa Claus. So let's start off with our title hero, Jake Spankenheimer. I didn't care about this character. Comparing Jake to the likes of Kevin from Home Alone and Ralphie from A Christmas Story is like comparing a cheap burger joint to a very fancy steakhouse. Yeah. Let's just say I'm not really impressed with Jake Spankenheimer as a main hero. He just seems to lack personality that will make him stand out. He doesn't really have that much personality to speak of. He's just there. He's just the nice kid. He's just the kid who is the goody two-shoes. Nothing more, nothing less. Then we get Grandma. Even though she can have some funny lines, and even though she has a shred of personality, she's just there. She doesn't really do that much. And, well, she constantly gets kidnapped. And, well, when it comes to her getting amnesia, that's another flaw with the story. The fact that she ended up getting amnesia was just almost uncalled for. And it just seemed like it's just a way to really throw in that, just to make the story have a little bit more tension. And then we get to the main villainess, Cousin Mel. I didn't care for her. I find her stupid, I find her annoying, and I just find her to be a very unmemorable villain. She's totally eye-rolling in terms of her motives. She is just totally bland, and she's just one of those generic, greedy, rich bitches who constantly wants to get a lot of money for her own petty needs. I find her motives to be petty, stupid, obnoxious, and then just dumb all throughout. She's a completely forgettable villain, and she makes the likes of Harry Lime and Marv Merchant seem a lot more multidimensional than her. She's completely forgettable. And then we have the likes of Santa Claus himself. He's the only decent character by default. The same thing can be said about Quincy, the elf. That's just it. There's not much to speak about them, but by default they're the only okay things about the characters. With Daphne, I don't care about her as a character. I just really don't care. She's just your stereotypical sassy big sister who constantly likes to tease her kid brother. And while there's nothing memorable about her, the parents are quite bland as characters. There's nothing that can make them stand out in terms of personality and in terms of likability. So I'm just unimpressed with the cast of characters, especially with that of Cousin Mel. Her motives as a villain were very, very lame. And that's saying something. Overall, like I said, I don't care about the characters. I find them bland. I find them uninteresting. And there's nothing home to write about them anyway. They're just there. They're just there going through the motions, and we don't know anything deeper about them. That's just it. The voice acting is quite decent, but it's also marred with inconsistencies. Elmo Shropshire does a pretty good job, given the circumstances, as both the narrator, or the adult Jake Spankenheimer, and Grandpa Spankenheimer. He does a pretty good job, and he also sings pretty well, given the circumstances. Susan Blue is, without a doubt, one of my most favorite voice actresses of all time, but her performance in this film is only okay. It's passable. She does get a few funny moments from time to time, but it's not a performance I would really rank really high on my resume. She's just okay. She does a pretty okay job voicing Grandma, and she doesn't go too over the top, so she's very decent in this role. And then we get Michelle Lee. Oh my goodness. Now, I never heard about this actress before. She did star in a soap opera that I never heard of, and she was also quite an obscure name. With Michelle Lee as Cousin Mel, her performance was marred by some inconsistencies in terms of her acting. There are times in which she can be good, there are times that she can be meh, and there are times in which she can be quite either wooden or hammy. There are times that she pretty much hams up her character. She tries to ham her up to be this bitchy, manipulative, slut of a character, but it just comes off as hammy and really annoying. And then we get the likes of Jim Stahl as Santa Claus. He does a pretty okay job in that role. And then we get Maggie Blue O'Hara as Daphne, and, she's okay. In fact, I would like to say that the voice actors, including the likes of Scott McNeil, Christopher Gaze, Phil Hayes, Pauline Newstone, and Kathleen Barr, do pretty decent jobs given the circumstances, but having another versatile voice actor like Cam Clark voicing Austin Bucks, and speaking of him, I just didn't even give a damn about his character. He was just the stereotypical rich guy. His performance of that unmemorable. Compare him and his other roles, and it just doesn't really stand out. So overall, well, it's no surprise that this animated Christmas TV movie did not really hold up very well. Everything about it was stupid, cheesy, it was illogical, and at times it just made me realize just how, well, below mediocre it really was. It has not held up. It just seems to get worse and worse as I grew up, and I'm still scratching my head as to why Cartoon Network is still airing this. They could have aired a lot more better Christmas specials, like, let's say, The Little Drummer Boy, which I plan to get to, or even a lot of the Rankin Bass Christmas specials. Yeah, they could have aired those as opposed to Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer. So, with that said, you know what I'm going to give this film. A 1 out of 5. Despite some decent things, it's not enough to save how forgettable and how crummy this film can be. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in later where I review a Baroque opera, which not a lot of people heard about, which is Tommaso Traetta's Antigone, which will be shown at the Vina Camo Opera. So until then, see you later, everybody, and I do hope I could get tickets for that, well, Baroque opera in particular, but we'll see. So anyways, I hope you all have a very happy holidays, everybody.